Hello React Native developers, what is going on? I am very excited about this week's episode, so welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native? This week we refresh with style. Hello guys, I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. In this week's episode, we are looking at the Google Chrome app. That's the second time we are looking at the Google Chrome app. The first time was to implement this nice tab animation with the masking of the icon. And this time we are looking at the refresh effect on the app. This was suggested from a subscriber of the show, and so you see I can just pull down the page. Let me just, and there is some gravity effect, so the more I pull, the harder it is. And then I can swipe left and right to select the button, and then you have this beautiful ellipsis animation that transition from one button to the other. So when I saw this example, I got really excited. I got really excited for three reasons. The first reason is that it really looks like something we haven't done before. What do I mean by that? So usually when we look at gestures and animation, what happens is that we have a gesture that is driving the animation, maybe a pan gesture handler, or some other kind of gesture, could be a rotation, a pinch. We have the gesture driving the animation, and then when we release the gesture, we have some sort of code that drives the animation. So maybe a snap effect. So let's say we're swiping, like let's say the Tinder example, we're swiping with our finger, and when we release the finger, we have some snapping effect that drives the animation. So the gesture drives the animation, and then we have some sort of a program to drive the animation further. Here, we really have a mix of both, meaning that when I transition from one button to the other, so here, the gesture is driving the animation, and then it transitions automatically to the next button, even though I still didn't release the gesture. And it's really the very first time I encounter such example. So I think it's really exciting. And this effect is really cool, by the way. So, and the second reason I'm really excited is that in order to implement such example, I think we really need everything to fall into place. So React Native gesture handler to handle the gesture properly, React Native reanimated, so both so the library, but also the higher level construct from reanimated. And by higher level construct, it's me just using a fancy word to mean I'm copy pasting code from the example repository of reanimated, and we need these modules to work well together with the React Native SVG module in order to natively animate the ellipses. So really a lot of different pieces from the React Native community that need to fall into place in order for this to be done in React Native. And the last reason I'm really excited is that it's a fairly complex example, but if we attack the problem nicely, the solution, I think, can present itself. And I think, I always research the examples before doing the recording. And so here you see you have, like I said, this transition, so an animation that happens even though the gesture is not released yet. So we have the gesture driving the animation, and then we have some sort of transition, even though the gesture is still active. And so for instance, that's one of the challenge in building this example. And so first, I think we can decide to ignore such a challenge and see how elegantly we can build a solution. And then hopefully, if we build a solution that is elegant enough, the solution will just appear itself in front of us. And so, okay, we remove the transition aspect of the problem. And then we still need to drive the animations from one button to the other. How do you build the transition values? To be honest, I don't think it's, I mean, for some people, it might really be easy to guess or to find out how the animation should be built. But to me, it's absolutely not obvious. And I think, you know, the way I would do it is really to, first of all, I'm not going to do anything generic. So I'm really going to do, okay, so here we have 3 buttons. So they all have an index 0, 1, 2. So I'm just going to build case by case. If the index is 0, these are the animation values. If the index is 1, these are the animation values, and so on. And then if we write this code nicely enough, hopefully the generic way we can build the animation should appear, because we can just refactor basically the common patterns. And then if we achieve this step nicely, the way we could do the transition should appear automatically. So if at the end we do have the animation that is driven by 1 or 2 parameters, I would say maybe 2 parameters. So one parameter that should drive the animation should be the ActiveIndex. And we need this value, for instance, to have animate the color of the icon. And then the second value should be the offset where we are in the gesture. So for instance, here I'm on the last button, but maybe actually the way I can move my finger on the screen is right now my finger might be on the left side actually of the screen, because it just depends on how I moved, or where I started the gesture and how far I moved my finger to get from one point to the other. So I think if we manage to build a solution that is elegant enough, that depends only on 2 animation values, let's say the index and the offset of the ellipses, then it should be just a matter of animating the transition from these 2 values. So from, let's say, index 0 to 1, and from the offset to from one value to the other. So I just think it's really exciting that, you know, we can look at an example, have no idea how it can be done, and really trying to attack the problem step by step, and having the solutions, because of the way we frame the problem, having the solution appear themselves to us. So how would we do this in React Native? So first, I would use Interactable from React Native Reanimated in order to build the gesture. So we can, by using Interactable, we can build this pull gesture with the gravity effect. That shouldn't be a problem. And then we can use also Interactable to have the horizontal gesture from left to right. And the X value is going to be what we're going to use to drive the animations. So again, we have an ActiveIndex and we have an ellipsis, which we're going to draw in SVG and that we can animate using Reanimated. And we're going to interpolate the shape of the ellipsis depending on the X value and where we are on the index. And then when we reach a threshold value, we update the index value, we update the offset of the ellipsis, so it's center essentially. And then if we manage to do this nicely, having the transition from one button to the other is just going to be, instead of setting, let's say, index +1 and x and center equals x, where x is the position of the finger, we are just going to animate towards this value. So we're going to animate towards +1, index +1, and towards the value of where the finger is. And then we also need to animate the color of the icon depending on the ActiveIndex, which is something also we can do without too much trouble. So guys, what do you think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. And before we get started, I would like to tell you about React Native Element. So if you have a new React Native project coming up, I really recommend you check it out. React Native Elements is a premium starter kit for React Native. It's 80% of what you need when starting a new React Native project, from static analysis, boilerplate navigation, and lots of beautiful UI components you can use for your app. You can try it on iOS using TestFlight, on Android using the Expo client, or by downloading the APK. So if you have a new React Native project to do, please check out React Native Elements. And the second thing, if you are looking to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. I will give you access to the private GitHub repository where I tinker with all these examples and future episodes of Can It Be Done in React Native. And I will also try to give you access to exclusive content as much as I can. And for both, I will put the link into the video description. So let's get started. Okay, so here I have a project, boilerplate project, which I created using Expo init, and then I have a script to transform it into a TypeScript project. If you want to follow along with this example, the link of the boilerplate project is available in the video description. It's a very simple boilerplate. In the app.js, I load the image that is needed for the content. While it's loading, I show the splash screen. When it's ready, I have the browser tab component, which has the header and content component, which you see here. And that's it. So the first step we're going to do is use Interactable to drive the pulling gesture. And then we're going to need to, based on this pulling gesture, animate the way the icons, the buttons appear. So the opacity, and also they're translated from side to side. Once we're done with this step, we will animate the ellipses. So first, just driving the ellipses animation using the gesture. And once we're done with that, we're going to add some transition effect for when the ellipses goes from one button to the other. So let's get started. And yeah, I think the first step I'm going to do is really to wrap these elements, so header and content, into Interactable. And I know that Interactable needs snap points parameter with at least one snap point for it to work. So we just create snap points and just x equals 0. We don't want any snap points. I just put this. So I mean, we do need a snap point actually on x equals 0 for the thing to snap back. And the interactable implementation I can take directly from React Native Reanimated repo, and it's in the example folder. So I'm going to create an example called component called interactable. Just update the export. So I import it here. And if you want the documentation, so Interactable is the React Native reanimated implementation of this module from Wix, React Native Interactable. So if you want the documentation of this module, you just go to this repository. And so I know here I can add animated value X and animated value Y to have the animation values of the interactable component. So we need to Y to pull and X in order to know for the horizontal animation. So animated value X equals X, animated value Y equals Y, just up. So I'm going to create X equals new value 0, Y equals new value 0. We import animated from the expo danger zone. Sounds so dramatic, danger zone. And so we have animated from the danger zone, and we have value from animated. Okay. Let's have a look actually. Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm just gonna disable this warning for now. And maybe make the code a bit bigger. Okay. So, all right. So here we can move the content, and we need to, so we're gonna need to, the content shouldn't move horizontally. We should only be able to pull. So what I'm gonna do is add an animated view where we're gonna translate X, so it cancels the dragging of X. So animated view style equals transform translate X is, so if the fingers goes to X, we want to translate to minus X, so we do multiply X minus 1. We import multiply from animated. Let's have a look. So now it only translates horizontally, which is vertically, sorry, which is pretty good. And here you see the background of the browser tab component. Like, we shouldn't see this white, we should see the same color than the background color of the header. So I think if I go here to header, this is the background color. So I can just maybe create a background view, view style equals styles background. I'm just going to create a style sheet here. Oops, sorry. Style sheet create, background is the same color. Oops, then the header, and we need to have it absolutely positioned. We need an absolute position fill, so it appears below. Let's have a look. All right, looks good. So now next step, when so you see here I can pull as much as I can, but but in the Google Chrome example you have some gravity to the center, to the top of the screen, which we need to add as well. And if we go to the interactable documentation and we search for gravity points, we can add a gravity points as well here. So I'm just gonna use this guy. Like so. So strength, we're gonna, so the position here is correct. Strength, we're gonna play with it. Fall off, I think it needs to be the height maybe of the window. So just put height. So we need to import dimensions from React Native. So let's have a look. Oh, and we need to pass gravity points as parameter, of course. Okay, so here, yeah, it works nicely. You see, I cannot pull as much as before. Maybe here is it a bit too hard? Because I remember on the Google Chrome, I think I could easily like swipe to maybe half of the screen. And maybe I put a bit less strength. It makes me think, you know, often people have asked me, you know, this bouncing effect in the scroll view on iOS. How do you implement it in for Android, for instance? Because it doesn't exist on Android. That's how you do it, right? Because what you see here is essentially the same effect, but it was going to work on Android as well. So here we have the gravity. I guess it's a bit better. We can leave it like this for now, I think. So now let's work on the icons. And we're gonna need to pass X and Y for the header. First, we're gonna need X to Y to animate the way the icons should appear. So you have this container with flex direction row, justify content space evenly, align item center, and a 8 of 64, which is wrapped into a safe area view. So we're gonna need 3 icons. So the first one, I think, so the one in the middle is refresh. So let's just check. So we can take this one. It's CCW. And then one is plus, and the other one is an X. So we import, so it's feeder as icon from @expo/vector icons. Size, maybe we put, let's see, 32. So let's have a look. And here I can already actually, add the X and Y value parameter. Okay. So we have the icons, we pull, and now we want, actually when we pull, we want the icons to go up. So to always look centered to the middle of, you know, whatever is the space left here between the header and the top of the screen. So we are gonna look at X, at Y from the props, and add a translation here maybe. So let's try transform, translate. So translate Y, we want the thing to always be in the middle, and we want to go opposite to the translation. So we should divide Y by -2. So we divide by 2 to have half, and then times -1 to go in the opposite direction. So I can import divide here. Let's have a look. Okay, so I have made a mistake here. It shouldn't be on the safe area view, but rather on the view containing the icons, and I need to use animated. So I can just put it here. Animated view. Okay, up. Let's have a look. Do I still have a syntax error here? Let's see. So should be an array. Could even put translate Y here. Okay. So looking good. The only, you see here, you have like this small thing because of the safe area view, but then it's like once we basically the header is not part of the safe area view anymore, this is no problem. So now we need to take care of the way the icons appear when we pull. So we're gonna wrap each of the icons into an animated view. So we're gonna need to animate the opacity and the position of the icon. So let me just quickly So the first thing we're gonna, let's animate the opacity. So the opacity, we're gonna interpolate its value from Y. So input range. So we go from 0 to the height and output range is 0 to 1. We just add extrapolate clamp. So I need to import extrapolate, interpolate, and I can use opacity in the middle icon. Okay, so it animates nicely. And now we need to translate these two. So I can have translation left. So interpolate on Y as well. And so we go from input range height till height times 2. So once the middle icon is visible and until 60, here I just put again 64 pixels just to be consistent. And the output range is minus whatever is the space to go to the center. So we're going to calculate this guy. So we have 3 icons which have a size of 32, and I can get the width of the screen from dimensions. So width equals dimensions window. Okay. So one segment is width minus the 3, so we have 3 times width size, so we have 3 icons, and we need to divide it by the number of negative spaces, which is 4. So here we should have the segment size, so we can translate left on segment to 0. So at the end we go to the original position, translate right, translation right, or translate goes from minus segment to 0. So I can add it here. Oh, here, yeah, that's correct. Translate x equals, should call it translate x left, translate x right, equals translate x left. Oh, actually I should only do translate x goes from 0 to, and on left we just do -1. So here we go from segment to 0. This is left, and for the right side we just multiply by -1. Which I import here. Let's have a look. Okay. Output range, input range. I do need to extrapolate here clamp, so we don't go further. It seems that, do I have a syntax? In translate. Okay. input range. Output range. So it appears and then it translates perfectly. Now we need to take care of the opacity, and we're going to create opacity. Maybe this one we can call it opacity center, and then we can create opacity. So interpolate Y. So here opacity is opacity center, and we're going to add opacity here for the left and for the right side. Okay, so opacity, we go from 8 to 8 times 2 and 0 to 1. So you see, it animates very nicely. Very cool. Okay, so now the main event, and the main event is the ellipsis animation, the cursor. And the cursor appears behind the icons. So we're gonna do a layer which is below. So we have here our view content, which contains the icon. So we're gonna build a view below, which is gonna be also animated. So since we animate this view, we need also to animate the background. So it's always exactly behind the view. So because it's in the background, we use style sheet absolute fill object, and we apply the same transformation. Does that look? No. And then inside we put the cursor component, and I also need to have some opacity for the cursor, as well as centering it the same way the icons are centered. So I'm gonna do, let me check. Up. So flex direction, row, everything is centered. We're gonna have some opacity. So opacity equals a cursor opacity, but I could use from 0 to 1 at 1. I think I could use either opacity or opacity center. Let's try opacity center. Yeah, that makes more sense. And we're going to create the cursor component. So import cursor from cursor. Now we get to the meat of the problem. And I'm just going to create component cursor. Perfect. And we know it's an SVG ellipsis, so I can import SVG from Expo. And I'm going to import ellipsis from SVG. So we have an SVG with an ellipsis, and we're going to draw it as a circle. So the first thing, maybe as parameter, I'm going to receive the size of the icon. So I can pass here size. And so no animation at the moment, just a circle. So we're going to have cx equals size. Sorry, I need to get this guy. cy equals size, rx equals size, and ry equals size. Width is the width of the screen, and height is the height of the header. So I import dimensions, and we need some background color, maybe just gray. So width is dimensions window, and height is 64. So I should factorize this 64 value in a constant, because we use it here and here. Let's have a look. So cursor is not SVG from expo. Ellipsis, it's ellipse. Okay. All right. Does it appear too early, the opacity? What did I use here? Opacity center, no, should be opacity, sorry. And that's actually what I meant originally. And let's see. So that looks good, and now I need to center the ellipsis. So I can just do cx equals maybe width divided by 2. When the ellipsis appears, so we're going to have an animated value for the index. So here the index is at 1. So we're going to create a value for the index. Sorry, index equals new value of 1. And we're going to need this to animate the color of the icon. So if it's the left or the right icon, so to animate the color value of the icon, because you cannot animate the icon directly, I'm going to use animated text and have icon as a child. This is going to allow me to animate the color. So we have black and white, and so the color is if index equals 0, so it's a condition index equals 0, then the color is white. If not, it is black. So I need to import condition and equal. Here, so same for the closing icon, but if the index is 2, and for the center, so it's a bit the same, but we have an extra condition, is that so if index equals 1, but also if we have translated by more than height, because before height the cursor doesn't appear, therefore the icon shouldn't be white. So condition is index equals 1 and greater than or greater or equal y8. So 8 is greater or equal than 8. So I can import it here. Let's have a look. Here I should use, sorry about that, the color node. So I can have color black is 0, 0, white is 255, 255, 255. Okay, perfect. So it works nicely. Now we need to animate the ellipses based on the X value. So here as parameter, I'm going to pass index because we're going to need to update the value when we switch to the index. And we need to pass X as parameter because this is what is going to drive the animation. X, we get it from here. So we need to animate CX and RX. So we have the middle of the screen, which is width divided by 2. And so we have CX, which is the middle of the screen plus X. So I should use import X. X is a value. I'm gonna need reanimated here. Okay, we need a couple of things here. We need to transform this into an animated ellipse. So const animated ellipse equals animated create animated component ellipse. Again, we import animated from danger zone. Okay. So we have here cx equals the middle plus x, and rx equals size plus whatever, so the plus the absolute value of x. So let's try add ABS. Let's have a look. So that's very good. Now what we need to do is to have some sort of threshold. So we couldn't go, you know, we couldn't have Rx bigger than a certain value. Both Rx and Cx actually. And so in order to do that, here in header, we calculated already the value, the space between each icon. So I can pass it as parameter here as well. So we have segment as number. Okay, so threshold right equals segment, const threshold left equals minus segment. And now we need to listen to x. Sorry. When we reach these values, we're going to update the index as well as the origin of the ellipses. But first, let's build the code. I'm going to wrap this into a fragment. Perfect. I'm going to use animated code. So up block, so the condition is when greater or equal than x is greater or equal of threshold right. Then we're going to update the index to +1. So index is index +1. Index we get here. To go to the left, we need to import set as well. To go to the left, so threshold left, we do index -1, but we also need, I mean, let's have a look. I think it's going to look strange because here we have Cx that still depends on the middle of the screen, but this value is actually dependent on the index we're at. So here I'm gonna, oh, do I need to? So here I'm gonna save an offset value, which is gonna be x, and I'm gonna use it to interpolate all the, so I don't seem here to, oh, it's lesser or equal, less or equal threshold left. Let me just maybe debug index to see if we do update the index value. Okay, so do we, yeah, we switch index here, and since, okay, I saw exactly what happened. So I mean, actually, if we print the index value, you see, of course, when we went to the left and I saw the icon becoming white, so becoming active, but then we kept going left. So we actually need to create a condition, can go left, can go right. Sorry, I meant the right side. So can go left if index, so greater than index greater than 0. Then we can go left, and we can go right if less, so index is less than 2. So great, I need to import these guys. I'm gonna need, yeah. Sorry, let's. So here we need to add this extra condition. So if we can go right and the threshold is higher than the right threshold, we go, and so here index is 1, now it's 2, but you see the ellipsis, position of the ellipsis needs to be updated. So what I'm gonna do here, so for the middle, we can have the center value of center or offset, you can call it. Yeah, it's an offset really. So a value of 0, which we need to update in every time we change index, and we're gonna set it to X, so to wherever the position of the finger is when we are updating the index. And now CX depends on, so both values now depends on this animation value, because here we need to remove whatever is center to X, and here the origin position is not necessarily the middle position. So let's start with Rx, and I think we should do, I mean, we could create a value called rest, which is a subtraction of center or X minus center. And here we have absolute value of rest, or maybe I call it offset. And here we need to calculate the middle value. So I'm gonna call it origin, and I'm gonna do an interpolate on the index value. And you see here, I'm purposefully not treating index as a discrete value, because I know later maybe we want to add the transition from one index to the other. So maybe later index won't be a discrete value anymore. Right now it is, because we just do add sub, but maybe later instead of doing add and sub, we will do run spring to +1, run spring to -1. Therefore, I'm going to use an interpolation here. So we go to, it can be 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, and the output range. We know that we have middle, so for 1 it's the middle, then it's middle plus the segment plus I think the size of the icon, and for 0 it's my middle minus segment minus the size. So this looks already pretty good, but now the threshold also needs to to be based on the center offset. So we're gonna add center to the segment and subtract the size of the index, the size of the icon. And here we're gonna add, so we're gonna subtract the center to the segment and add the size of the icon. Up. Let's have a look. Index. Why is it? Oh, so we have index. Let's have a look. Maybe we can just also. Okay, so here index doesn't move. I think I have a syntax error here. Up. And CX should depend on offset, not X, like we did for RX, but let's see. Anyways, doesn't matter for. Okay, boom, I switch. And now it looks good, except that CX is wrong, should be offset. So now it should work pretty nicely. Boom, boom, boom. So it works very nicely. And now you see when we update index, there is no transition. So the CX and RX value is really like from one frame to the other changes completely. And so what we would like to do is to animate nicely like it is done in the Google Chrome example. And so here, instead of abruptly setting index of +1, we're going to transition towards an index of +1. Instead of abruptly setting center to X, we're going to use, for instance, run timing function to animate to center and to index. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to need, let's say, a run timing function. So I'm going to create an animated helpers file, and I'm going to copy a run timing function again from the example of reanimated, React Native reanimated up. And I'm going to search for run timing. Maybe this one here. Looks good. So we have animated and easing from the danger zone. Okay. Looks good. And so I'm gonna need to import it here in cursor. So run timing from animated helpers. All right, so here, when we need to go right, so okay, there is 2 values to animate. So we need 2 clocks. So I'm gonna create a clock index. And a clock center. We also need 2 new animation values. So one if we're transitioning to the right, one if you're transitioning to the left. So transitioning left equals new value 0. Transitioning right equals new value 0 as well. And so here, if we can go right, we set transitioning right to 1. Here we set transitioning left to 1. Then we look if transitioning right equals 1. Then we need to run, so again, set index, we do a run timing of index clock, it's called clock index, to index at index plus 1, center goes from, so we use clock center from center to X. And if the clock is stopped, so let's say clock running of clock index equals 0. And I need to import clock running. Then we set transitioning right to 0. The transition is over. So I'm just import. And now we need to do the same for the left. So transitioning left. And here it's index minus 1. Center, change nothing. So let's have a look. And I think it was 5 seconds. So pretty slow transition. But we can put it maybe to 300 milliseconds. Up. Yup. So pretty cool now. What do you guys think? I will link in the video description the source code, link to the GitHub repository as well as the snack if you want to play with this example. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to talk to you guys soon. And in the meantime, happy hacking.